right, welcome everybody. This is session 21, which is lift each other up, seeing opportunities and sawing barriers. And I'm Chris Gade. Many of you know me from my last career, which was at ADOT, but about 9 months ago, I switched to Pima County, where they created a new Department of Conservation Lands and Resources. And so I still get to work on wildlife crossings and pollinators and endangered species, habitat conservation plan. So very excited to be here and now representing local government. We're going to have 3 talks in this session. They'll be 20 minutes each, so 15 minutes about for the talk and then 5 for questions. And then we'll have some extra time so we can continue with discussion or questions at that point. So our first presentation is virtual, and it's going to be Laci Pattavina from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, talking about agency partnerships and tools for streamlining transportation consultation.
Hey, good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Laci Pattavina. I'm with the Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm located in Georgia, in the Georgia Ecological Services Field Office. And I just wanted to start by thanking the ICOET Planning Committee for allowing this meeting to be hybrid so that those of us who couldn't attend are still able to participate. Really appreciate that. And I also want to acknowledge my collaborators on this presentation. So my coworker, Eric Prowell, who's also with Fish and Wildlife Service, and then 2 co-authors, Ryan Pawlikowski and Chris Goodson, who are with the Georgia Department of Transportation. And I believe they're both physically at ICOET in Denver. So if you guys are in the room, hello. So I'm going to talk about some of our agency partnerships and how we've used those partnerships as tools to leverage streamlining our consultation processes. And most of what I'm going to focus on is going to be related specifically to consultations under the Endangered Species Act, since that's one of the primary authorities that we work with GDOT under at Fish and Wildlife Service. And I'm not sure why my slides are not advancing. There we go. Okay, I'll start with just a little bit of background on Georgia's transportation program. Georgia is really the transportation hub, one of the major transportation hubs of the Southeast, if you're not familiar. We have the 10th largest transportation network in the United States with 210 million vehicle miles traveled daily and a really extensive network of railways, ports, waterways, and aviation hubs, including the United States' busiest airport at Hartsfield-Jackson. Many of you have probably flown through our state, even if you haven't stepped outside of our airport. And GDOT programmed greater than $5.5 billion for about 1,200 projects just in 2024, which is a huge amount of growth in over less than the last 10 years, double the funding and double the number of projects. So the transportation network in Georgia is very prolific and always growing, and we're always looking to improve our roadways in our state. Of course, with a really prolific transportation program, there are a lot of environmental procedures that have to be followed for each of those projects. And so there are a number of environmental regulations, laws, and statutes that have to be followed related to the natural environment, to the cultural environment, and the social environment. And so when you have such a large transportation network and you have a lot of environmental review process that needs to be followed, there's a need to create efficiency and consistency and predictability in order to keep a program of the size that GDOT is managing streamlined and on track, and keeping the schedules aligned with the goals. One of the ways that GDOT has, specifically the GDOT Office of Environmental Services, has prioritized being able to keep the environmental process on track is to create what's called the Interagency Office of Environmental Quality, which is a group of representatives at all the agencies listed here. And the goal is to create a culture of collaboration between all of those agencies at the state and federal partnerships for high quality and efficient environmental process. So GDOT funds, I think it's 19 different positions at these various agencies. so that we're able to work together to prioritize the program. It hasn't always been 19 positions that have been funded. As the program has grown, the number of positions that they've been able to fund has also grown. And so we've been able to make adjustments and increase our capacity as a group of collaborators as the program has continued to have a greater and greater need. Through the Interagency Office of Environmental Quality, we're able to learn about our knowledge gaps. We are really focused on trying to avoid rework and redundancy by having a lot of our different environmental review processes occurring concurrently. So they're not happening one after the other. We're able to review documents at different levels all at the same time. And we try to create innovation through collaboration and develop initiatives for further efficiency whenever possible. And we do all of this without cutting corners in the environmental review requirements or without changing the environmental commitments that GDOT wants to make. One of the greatest successes of collaboration that we've had through this group of agencies is the joint coordination procedures. The JCP originated actually before the Office of Environmental Quality in 2003, but the current version that we're working under right now was signed in 2021, and it was able to be updated and completed in large part due to the capacity of the IOEQ being able to manage it. And what the JCP does is it outlines our roles and responsibilities for the agencies that are listed here. So this is primarily focused on the partnership between GDOT and Federal Highway Administration as their primary lead federal agency in consultation, and the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Wildlife Resources Division at our state resource agency, Georgia DNR, so that we have a very clear process for completing our environmental review. There are standard operating procedures for every level of the environmental review process that we do as a group of agencies, everything from early coordination and technical assistance, where at the very beginning stages of a project, GDOT's just trying to figure out what species they may need to address, all the way to our informal and formal Section 7 processes and our processes for reinitiation, considering the Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act, migratory birds and bats, bald and golden eagles, and then also how we address changes to the status or the ranges of the species under the jurisdiction of our agencies. And as the program has grown, the needs have also changed. And so additional SOPs have kind of come into development as this group of collaborators have found that we're working on the same kind of issue over and over again, and that we could really use an SOP. So these are the ones that we have right now. These are not the ones that were always with us from the very beginning, and we've got several others that are in development. So we're able to make changes to this joint coordination procedures as we need to make sure that we are continuing to streamline. This graphic on the right is just an early example of a subset of data after the 2021 version of the JCP was signed. And so just taking a look at about 160 projects that came through environmental review after the current version was completed, 70%, about 71% of those didn't require any agency action by the Federal Highway Administration or the resource agencies, because GDOT was able to follow the standard operating procedures laid out in the JCP. So it reduced a huge amount of the agency responses that were required and created a lot of efficiency and left a lot more time available for us to all work on different initiatives that we're interested in, because our environmental process was moving more predictably and efficiently. Some other great successes of these agency collaborations are our State of Georgia Species Survey Methodologies Manual. This was put together by Fish and Wildlife, DNR, and DOT a number of years ago. We presented on this as a group of agencies at the 2019 ICOET in Sacramento, and we've been using it successfully since that time. It's been updated a few times to add some changes and some new species, but this is a standard methodology manual for anybody that's working on GDOT's program to survey in a standardized way for any state or federally listed species that's being addressed on projects. GDOT also hosts a long list of environmental procedures guidebooks for their ecology team and their consulting community, so that everything from the very basics of a project all the way to how to apply for 404 permit review and buffer variance review and using programmatic agreements is outlined in guidebooks, so that everybody is able to be very clear what the expectations are and follow a streamlined process. We're also able, as a group of agencies, to focus time on training opportunities when they're necessary. So one of the biggest successes that we've had in Georgia in terms of training is our Bats and Bridges training that we teach annually a couple of times. If you are at ICOET in person and you were able to get there on Sunday, you might have attended the mini Bats and Bridges training that was given Sunday afternoon. One of my collaborators, Trina Morris with Georgia DNR, was there as one of the instructors. She and I work together to offer Bats and Bridges training in Georgia every spring, and it's a great way to make sure that everybody in GDOT's ecology and consultant community are following the same procedures to look at all of our bridges and culverts across the state program for impacts to bats. We've also offered reptile and amphibian training as a group of agencies in the past, looking at species such as the alligator snapping turtle or some of our really rare amphibians, the reticulated and frosted flatwood salamander species. And we're open to other training opportunities and field-based learning opportunities as necessary to make sure that the community of practice is all working together in a consistent and efficient manner. Probably some of the greatest successes of our team of agencies in terms of efficiency are our collaborative programmatic agreements. There's a couple of these that are have individual talks at ICOET this week, so hopefully you can check out some of those presentations as well. Our collaborative programmatic agreements are big consultation documents. They include the traditional biological assessment that a applicant or federal agency would submit to the Fish and Wildlife Service with a biological opinion expected in response, but those two documents are included together in a single agreement. We complete these agreements on similar taxonomic groupings, and we set out a goal to cover all of GDOT's programs, so any potential project type when we put them together. Through these agreements, we're able to standardize our avoidance and minimization measures, and GDOT, with their lead federal agencies, are able to make conservation commitments that they will apply across their program. And then we do involve the formal Section 7 process in these agreements, so we're able to cover incidental take in certain situations and incorporate conference opinions for any species that are proposed for listing but are not yet listed. And then, as feasible, we do also include additional protections for our state species in these agreements. And the intention is that by covering as many species and as many project types as possible, that regardless of what happens in the list of species, perhaps something new becomes proposed for listing or a proposed listing becomes finalized. We've already considered those species in the programmatic, and so applying the avoidance minimization measures and conservation commitments across those new listings or changes in status are more streamlined than they would have been without these programmatic agreements. We have a few of these agreements that have either already been completed or are in process now. So we have a programmatic not likely to adversely affect agreement for the indigo snake, the gopher tortoise, and the eastern pocket gopher that was developed as part of our JCP. This does not include an incidental take statement. It's just an informal consultation at this time, but it is one that we hope to update in the future to cover incidental take for the indigo snake, which is a listed species. About a year and a half ago, we completed our bat programmatic, which covers all of the species of bats that occur in the state, the 16 different species, so levels all the way from federally listed to federally proposed to state listed to just state species of concern. And then our very most common bat species are also included. That agreement has been a huge success. And I think on Thursday morning, there was a presentation given by Ryan Pawlikowski on the bat programmatic agreement. We also have an aquatics and semi-aquatics programmatic that's in progress. If you were able to watch that talk, it was just before lunch, delivered by Morgan Nicoli and Matt Carroll. So if you have additional questions about that programmatic, they are there in person and can probably answer questions about that. That is a agreement that is still in development, and we're hoping to finish it this year. We have future programmatic agreements kind of on the queue to get started on as soon as time allows. When we finish the aquatic and semi-aquatic programmatic, we're hoping to move on to plant and pollinator species and cover those together in their own document. And then eventually we would like to update that existing eastern indigo snake and programmatic to include the likely to adversely affect activities as well, and develop an incidental take statement for that one. So that's just a snapshot of what we've been able to accomplish as a group of agencies, mostly related to the Endangered Species Act. And there's so much more collaboration that happens as a part of GDOT's Office of Environmental Services and the IOEQ that they've put together. So by being able to prioritize our goals together as a group of agencies and really focus our time through these funded positions, we've been able to create these trusting relationships and really create a lot of efficiency and streamlining through GDOT's program, which works great for GDOT, but it also works great for all of the agencies that are helping to deliver the program as well. So thank you for your time. And I think I have some time for questions if there are any.
Do we have any online? Okay. Questions for the room? Yes. I'll bring you the microphone so the people online can hear.
Yeah, at WashDOT, we have a very similar standardized approach and streamlining effort. I was wondering, specifically to liaisons with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and National Fisheries Service, WashDOT does fund those positions, and they work on nothing but our projects. So if we do have individual consultations, they're writing the biological opinion. For those DOT funded positions at the services, are those liaisons, are they preparing biological opinions?
I didn't hear the entire question. I know it was related to liaisons and biological opinions. Could you repeat the last part of that question? Sure,
yeah. Are the funded positions at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, are they preparing biological opinions? Are they
Yes.
Liaisons? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
I have a quick question. So we were working on this in Arizona, and just wondering, the first time we were working on one of these programmatic biological opinions, how long did it take? Because we before I left, we were in quite a cycle.
Yeah, they can take quite a lot of time. They're definitely takes longer than the standard 135-day consultation timeline. The BAT programmatic is the largest one that we have completed up to this time, and it took about 2 years to do the full programmatic. But that also included a conservation funding agreement that was part of one of the commitments that GDOT made as part of that programmatic, and so that kind of added some time because there was some kinks to work out with that as well. But yeah, about 2 years of fairly regular meetings. And I'll just say too, that we really relied on some great consultants to help with that process as well. So the agencies were all at the table, but we also had some really great collaborators at Arcadis and ICF that helped us complete that programmatic. And I would recommend having contractor help, if possible, on any large collaborative effort like that one.
Thanks. There we go. One more question.
Are any of your funded positions co-funded with other agencies, especially state agencies?
In Georgia, no. The positions at Fish and Wildlife specifically are funded just by DOT. They're not co-funded by DOT and others. As far as the other positions that DOT funds within the group of agencies, I'm not sure if they're co-funded. I think almost all of them are fully funded by DOT.
All right, thank you, Laci. We're going to move on to the next speaker, and then we'll have some more time for questions at the end after all the presentations.
Thank you.
Also, I would like to add, if you do have a really pressing question or you're a little embarrassed of looking not so smart in front of all these great professionals, you can always go onto the Slido and ask an anonymous question. I think it's great, very helpful, especially since I'm a student, early career professional. There's a lot of terminology I don't really understand. I'm a little embarrassed to let other people know.
Do you want to stand up? Probably can't.
She's gonna stand.
not so much fun.
All right, so now from my home in Tucson, we've got Jessica Moreno from the Coalition for Sonora Desert Protection, talking about wildlife connectivity in one of our wildlife leagues.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. And welcome to everyone online as well. My name is Jessica Moreno, and I am the Conservation Science Director for the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection, which is quite a mouthful, but it's a really lovely nonprofit organization based in Pima County, Arizona. And today we're going to be talking about a particular wildlife linkage that is very dear to my heart because I live near it for one reason. And our work in this area began a very long time ago with the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, which is how our organization kind of came to fruition, which is all about collaboration and partners as well. I could do another whole presentation about that. But we came together as a true coalition of member groups. So we're made up of organizations, 31 right now, organizations in the region. Some are national and some are very local, from HOAs all the way up to international and national NGO partners. So our focus is to protect the Sonoran Desert in basically Pima County mostly, but we do bleed outside of that jurisdiction a little bit because wildlife and plants do not recognize borders. So we must also do the same. And we do this through advocacy, education, and collaboration. Some of our biggest successes have been the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, which brought together developers with scientists and tribes and all the stakeholders we could find over essentially a 20-year process to come to some agreements that would streamline development and conservation in the region. We're also known for the designation of the Ironwood National Monument and getting that passed, which I think we will still be working on. We're very grateful to work with our local tribes and on traditional indigenous lands, particularly of the Yaqui and the Totono Altam nations. And that has been a really important connection. I think it's important to always remember that while we're doing these projects and thinking about conservation, that we have the very first scientists and botanists and wildlife biologists right there who have been in that region for much, much longer than we have. And that's valuable. So this map is from the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, and it's showing us Pima County in the southern region of Arizona. We are up against the international border with Mexico. The green areas are core habitat areas, and the blue are riparian areas, and the purple are our wildlife corridors. So those are the areas where I've been working primarily with the coalition to connect around Tucson and Pima County. These wildlife linkage corridors. The stars are areas where we have projects currently. And I'm going to just back up for a second and talk about a successful project that we've now completed to give you an idea of where we are with this new project. So this is the linkage between Catalina State Park, essentially the Catalina Mountains and the Tortolita Mountains in just north of Tucson, Arizona. And it's divided by a 6-lane highway, Oracle Road or State Route 77. And through a lot of collaborative work, we were able to get the funding and implementation of a wildlife bridge, the first in the Sonoran Desert, and also associated underpass as well, just south of that, about a mile south of that. So this has been work where we started with working with ADOT, getting the modeling done, figuring out where animals are getting hit on the road, where we needed to put these, and then going through all of that difficult work of figuring out jurisdictions where land ownership needed to be. Pima County has been purchasing open space in the area, so we're not building a bridge to nowhere. In those purple areas, you can see the green, which are established. And actually, as of like last month, we can add Another area of green in there, that little divot that cuts into the Catalina Mountain Green area is Kelly Ranch. It's a 109-acre ranch that was just purchased to expand Catalina State Park in April. So we're still at it. Very exciting. All this stuff is long-term work, and it's successful. The Wildlife Bridge in particular, working with Arizona Game and Fish, they were able to monitor the crossings themselves while we were monitoring the area to see what kind of trends we were seeing at a larger scale. And we've been seeing about 2,000 animal crossings every month and growing. I'm sure the number's higher, Jeff could tell me. And we're seeing everything we expected and some things we did not expect. So it's a really exciting project to be a part of. Primarily, we're seeing mule deer and javelina, bobcat and coyote, but we've also had some really notable records of black bear, white-nosed coati, badgers, desert tortoises, and mountain lion. So that's very exciting. We also had one bighorn sheep approach, but didn't go across, so we're waiting for that one. And this is all to help, wildlife populations thrive in our region and not get isolated between these mountain ranges that are separated by low-end desert habitats and a lot of development. So I'm just gonna pop over now from the Catalina Mountains over to the Tucson Mountains. So now we're gonna be looking at I-10. So this is Interstate 10. As you're driving north to Phoenix from Tucson and leaving the city in the town of Marana. This is a 6-lane divided highway. It splits the Tucson-Tortolita Mountains wildlife linkage, which is a very important wildlife linkage that connects the Tucson Mountains and all the areas beyond with the Tortolita Mountains for species like bighorn sheep, desert tortoise, mule deer, mountain lion, also kit fox. And it intersects with the biologically important Santa Cruz River and El Rio Preserve, where we have permanent surface water, a very important factor in the Sonoran Desert, as you can imagine. Here's a picture of what we are looking at. Along this corridor, there are more barriers to wildlife movement than just the 6-lane freeway. We've got 2 frontage roads, a double-track railroad, several vehicle barriers, highway fences and cable fencing, and a steep and impassable soil cement embankment levee by the Santa Cruz River. And this, along with rapid open space development, has made it one of the most critically threatened wildlife movement corridors in Arizona. That's a lot to navigate for a critter. Currently, the only safe wildlife passage available is an abandoned railroad underpass located near Alvar Valley Road. And there's still a lot to navigate even with this there. So they still have to get through the frontage roads, the railroads, the vehicle barriers, and the river levee. And building a bridge long-term over a bridge is really expensive, as you can imagine. But we're in luck because the Arizona Department of Transportation plans to one day, it's not on the calendar. What do you say? It's not funded yet and it's not on the calendar, but it is in the long-term plans to one day flatten this section of interstate and use that soil in a different project area up by Tangerine Road and remove the underpass. And when they do that, that's our chance to build something much better. So here's a picture of that wildlife linkage and the pathway where animals are moving between the Tortolita Mountains and the Tucson Mountains. And the Tucson Mountains, you might know if you're not familiar with this area, is well known for Saguaro National Park West and the Arizona Desert Museum and places like that. So it's a really unique habitat. What we did is we stratified the area into six sections, and we've placed wildlife cameras along these. We've got 4 in each section, so 24 cameras stratified across 6 areas. And this project started in 2017, and we've expanded it since so that now we're on both sides of the highway. The project in 2017 began in response to the fact that 2 bighorn sheep showed up in the Tucson Mountains, were nosing around, and then had to turn back. And that excited a lot of people. This was around the same time that we were reintroducing, were reintroducing bighorn sheep in the Catalina Mountains. So now there's this idea, well, maybe the population in the Catalina Mountains could one day expand into the Tortolita Mountains across our wildlife bridge and Oracle Road. And then we got to get them across the Tucson Mountains so they can reconnect with the Silverbill Mountain population to the west. So bighorn sheep got people very excited. We've been monitoring in the area since then. It's been about 8 years now. And we've seen 43 different mammal species. One of those that I was really excited about was the kit fox. We're able to compare a little bit west and east of the highway. We're gathering some baseline data. We're still kind of in the beginning stages of analyzing a lot of this, so I don't have a great lot of detail here, but we've seen a number of mammal and non-mammal critters too. This is basically just species abundance west of I-10, and you can see that we have quite a few javelina and coyotes and cottontails. So there's a lot of food out there, which is really good, west of I-10. And this would be the area where we've got standing water by the river. East of I-10, we're still seeing lots of javelina, but the jackrabbit population is much higher here. Part of this is a habitat difference. This is different kind of Sonoran Desert habitat. All of these areas that we're monitoring are different in terms of habitat and elevation. So it's really interesting to compare those two. We're also seeing a lot of mule deer, and again, like species like kit fox, which we have not seen west of the highway. This is just a comparison of cumulative detections of mule deer across all of our study sites. And you can see that there are definitely some preferences by the deer. The scenic drive, what we're calling the scenic drive study area, is up in higher elevation. Actually, it's in the foothills of the Tucson Mountains on private lands, so not as much disturbance. And that might be why we're seeing a lot more deer moving around in there. We've also conducted some preliminary roadkill surveys, which suggests a completely blocked linkage. This is what makes funding these kinds of projects really difficult. We did a survey between the Portero Road and Twin Peaks Road exits. They were done at sunrise for 7 consecutive days. And again, this was just like a preliminary, see what's going on. And we only found one road-killed animal, and it was a domestic dog. So on one hand, this looks like good news, no roadkill. But on the other hand, when you think about it, this suggests that the linkage is so blocked, most wildlife are not even attempting to cross the interstate. One thing I want to go back and look at is the crash rates over time and see if they've decreased over time for the same reason. This makes funding difficult and challenging because most funding priorities are given to wildlife crossing projects that will reduce the most human fatalities or crashes on the road. And that is not a problem here because it is so constrained. So we've started a collaborative partnership with the local universities and Saguaro National Park West to begin doing regular roadkill surveys in this area and others that we can compare. We're calling the Wildlife Road Watch Project and our Desert Roadie volunteers. And this photograph is a personal one to me because this is a female mountain lion in Saguaro National Park West that was killed on Pitcher Rocks Road. And she's actually one of the last breeding females at that time that I was studying in a camera study in the Tucson Mountains. So with her, we lost our oldest female breeding cat there. Thankfully, there are still mountain lions in that area, which, you know, is good, but the population is so small that it really does require some connectivity to the other mountain ranges in order to maintain those populations. At least at that time in 2017, we suspected that the breeding male actually didn't even stay in the Tucson Mountains very often, and he just came to visit. so that's one thing. There are a lot of pieces to the puzzle with this problem. Funding is one, open space protection is another, but again, working with Pima County and the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, we're able to purchase and acquire properties to make sure that that linkage is intact. There's also an effort to create the Santa Cruz River Urban Wildlife Refuge. So we've got Fish and Wildlife Service involved too. and a lot of players who are excited about that effort. Our work also involves being the friendly neighborhood watchdog with development and making sure that the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan is being used appropriately. And one of those is opposing the Interstate 11 West option. They want to build a new freeway west of the Tucson Mountains. That would be devastating for Sorrel National Park West and for our water supply and for our wildlife. So we're working on that issue. We're doing a lot of community outreach. And I have found that getting out there and talking to the residents about these issues, and you can show them the pictures and take them, and you can't walk across that freeway yourself. Wildlife cameras, and also remarkably, removing barbed wire fence has been a really great way to connect people together. The Desert Fence Busters project is something that we started recently, and we have employees and volunteers from Arizona Game and Fish, hunting groups, nonprofits like ourselves, and the Tucson Bird Alliance, which is previously known as the Tucson Audubon Society. Students, Sorrel National Park, the Gambit, it's amazing. So we'll have like 65 plus volunteers each trip. To date, we've removed nearly 70 miles of barbed wire fence, redundant old barbed wire fence out of the area, which has been a tremendous help in opening up the area for wildlife. We're doing riparian restoration with Marana, the town of Marana at El Rio Preserve, removing invasive species and planting natives. And then I guess the policy stuff also is another part of that. So there's something for everyone and a lot to do, and we can't do it without our partners. I want to give a really quick example here with the Santa Cruz River wildlife ramp that is currently under construction right now. So this is the problem of getting into the river and out of the river past that levee. And what we did is we had Pima County come together with Pima County Floodplain Control, engineers, Game and Fish, and others with us to design something new. If anyone else has something like this that they know about, please, I'd love to pick your brain. This is designed to still manage the floodwaters that we get through our monsoon seasons, massive floods once a year, while still allowing wildlife to get access to the river in and out. So it's new, we're gonna see how it works, and I'm excited about that project. And again, this effort wouldn't be possible without Pima County, the town of Marana, our coalition member groups and partners, Arizona Game and Fish, our interns, our volunteers, everyone. So muchas gracias. It's really, really heartwarming as much as it is challenging to work with so many different perspectives and viewpoints and talents coming to the table. I usually always end with this quote by Thomas Lovejoy. The choice is not between wild places and people, but it's a choice between a rich or impoverished existence. He said for man, I'm gonna say for us all. So this is a really important piece too. A lot of people who come to Southern Arizona, we have our snowbird migration. We talk about people who come for seasonally or to visit and see the wonderful area, love our wildlife, and it's a huge part of why people are attracted to this place. So apologies to Jeff Gagnon. This is my napkin design, a rough sketch I created to help us visualize what we hope to achieve. It's not intended to be accurate or official, but I hope it's inspirational. Something like this is possible. It's a 750-foot span. We can do it. We have the engineering. We've done it successfully before, and we can do it here too. If you want to learn more about this project and the other projects that are all tied into it and integrated, please visit our website, or you can reach out to me. Thank you. I'll take questions.
Hey, thank you, Jessica. How lucky am I to be the director of the conservation department working with this group?
Everybody say thank you to Chris.
Okay, question, yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I don't know if you mentioned this, but I just had a question about the camera study. Are you monitoring existing culverts and bridges that are along the I-10 to see if wildlife are using those?
Yes, so the big point here is that there are none. It's just that railroad underpass. And again, there's some big concrete vehicle barriers that are on both ends of it to keep people from driving through, which I nudge open as much as I can every time I walk by. But yes, so we're monitoring that. We're monitoring the new levee ramp and the area. But yeah, there's no other options.
Hey, so I was just thinking about that stuff to the south of Tucson. So that mountain, that's the southern area. Is that just completely cut off from the south of Tucson mountains? Is there no connection?
So south of the Tucson mountains, we have Ajo, the Ajo Highway, State Route 86. And we do have wildlife crossing structures there that we have built. There was plans for a bridge, but because of many issues that come up, you know how these things go, we have some underpasses there. So we do have bighorn sheep that cross SR 86 to connect those regions. And again, I wish I could show the whole map because it really is a network. And this is the one place that is the most difficult to tackle and will be the most, I think, impactful for the region to fix. Any other questions?
I think you showed some data about some amphibian species. I'm wondering about some of the reptiles, if they're using these. So you have a lot of rattlesnakes, silver snakes, there's beetle monsters.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we have. Well, the Sonoran Desert's home to about 100 different reptiles. So if you're a herper, it's a place to be. Yeah. We have seen a lot of sidewinders on our roadkill surveys, unfortunately. I think what I'm planning to do in the future is to do something to look at herp crossings at that underpass and at the ramp. Right now, our cameras are mostly focused on larger species like deer and kit fox. So kit fox aren't that large, but larger than a tortoise. We are also very interested in tortoises. Arizona Game and Fish has been doing a project at Oracle Road where they actually put little, not collars, but little trackers on a bunch of tortoises to see how they were navigating the road. And for the most part, they weren't. So, you know, presumably that's the same situation here, but we could do a repeat study on that. There's also bobcats in Tucson study in the area through the University of Arizona and other partners that have collared bobcats to see how bobcats are moving around. And they've had some really interesting results from that. But again, there's not much getting past this barrier.
Okay. We have one more. It is kind of a political question, but are you concerned at all about the expansion of the border wall to the south and that impacting wildlife movement to the Tucson area, or like most of this population is kind of restricted to the several mountain ranges around Tucson?
They are all connected. They are all connected. So yes, very much so. Bighorn sheep, pronghorn, we've got jaguars and ocelots in the region that don't come up as far as this particular site in terms of their habitat preferences, but yes, absolutely. And as one example, those of you who saw Eamon's talk, see here, he was, Sky and Alliance is doing a really great border study that you should, I think you were there. One of the things he didn't mention was that I-10 is parallel to the border, north of the border. And that space in between the border and I-10 has created a vacuum. So we've genetically been able to prove that black bears north of I-10 are the White Mountain population and south of I-10 are the Mexico population. So if the border breaks that connection to Mexico, not only does that harm the endangered status of bears in Mexico, but the ones that are trapped in between will die out. So that's another thing to consider. You know, it's all cumulative impacts. So we see the big ones but the little ones make a difference too, which is why I think when we're building our partnerships, starting small and seeing small successes like the fence busting, where we can go out there and physically see, I've removed this many tons of fence and the deer are moving through it the next morning, has been heartwarming and also motivating when you have to deal with these long-term projects.
Oh, okay, one.
How was your work with the Tohono and Ascoyaki tribes?
Yeah, yeah,
Outreach easy?
no. but
Could you
I would-
repeat the question for.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. How was our outreach with the Tohono O'odham and Yaqui tribes? Because we work in all of these different partnerships, a lot of times us as the coalition have to act as we have to invite people to the table and make sure they're at the table, repeat things that are said all the time. One example of this is the State Route 86 wildlife crossing structures that have been built to date, but the wildlife bridge was not for various reasons. That's on O'odham land, that's on the reservation. So nothing can happen without the reservation, without the tribe, you know? And when things change and decisions are made without them at the table, they feel left out and they feel like, well, they feel left out. They have been left out. So it's a problem and we have to get back together again and repair those relationships there. It has been really fun to work with the tribe with the desert fence busting though, because we're able to go onto their properties. We work with BKW Farms where they're doing farming and removing barbed wire fence there that's redundant, and then donating the materials. So we take all that tons of metal and recycle it and donate those ones back. And the T-posts we can reuse, so we donate them to the farm to reuse and things like that. We have to move at the speed of trust, and I wish we were moving faster. I think there's more to be done there for sure.
Right, thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
And questions at the end also. All right, our next presenter is Tiara Groff from Environmental Science Associates, and she is talking about interagency cooperation for middle mile projects in California, which Pima County is working on starting a middle mile project, so I'm very excited to hear this.
So glad you're working this. Okay. Great. Well, yeah, thank you everybody for being here. I'd like to first start off by acknowledging the folks that worked on this project that could not be here from the Fish and Wildlife Service, David Shearer and Colleen Dragescu. We also had Jen Osmondson at California Department of Transportation, the headquarters, who was an important driver for this effort. As well as the Federal Highway Administration, Jeanette Moore. All of these folks were instrumental in moving this effort forward and really dedicated a lot of time and really wanted to be here to share this project with you guys. And so I really wanted to take a moment to acknowledge their work on this project. So I'm going to start off with an overview of what the Middle Mile Broadband Network in California is, how we applied the consultation process and methods to do this large scale effort, as well as how efforts we use to do some streamlining flexibility, as well as some lessons learned. And all of the species pictures you see here are some of the species that we included. I had a lot of fun finding these pictures. So what is California Middle Mile Broadband? In 2021, Governor of California signed Senate Bill 156, which expanded California's broadband fiber infrastructure and sought to increase internet connectivity for families and businesses with a particular emphasis on unconnected or underconnected communities. So as you can see in this graphic here, it's kind of as the name is, it's the middle mile, right? And the first mile being the internet, you know, the formal internet, and then the last mile being, you know, the other projects that take from this middle section and bring the direct connections to homes and businesses and communities. This project was immense. We assessed the impacts, environmental considerations of 10,000 miles of the state highway system, as well as over 250 species, 122 critical habitats. It reached every single ecoregion in California, as well as habitat. So it was just, it can't even like express how large of an effort this was. I think it was every species that's federally or threatened or endangered in California, not necessarily every critical habitat, but it was definitely a crash course in the biology of California wildlife and plant species. The reason we took this geographic scope was so that Caltrans could take individual projects that were more like tens of miles that would affect listed species and utilize this programmatic decision to get their regulatory Endangered Species Act compliance addressed. So how did we do this huge scale effort? We took an extremely conservative approach to habitat modeling. We used statewide vegetation communities and associated them with all of the different species. We estimated then the ratio of suitable habitat and applied that to the linear alignment within each species range. I have formulas for that if anybody is interested. A big issue here was the exact conduit alignment and other project features, the locations of were unknown. And so we really had to take a very conservative, high level assessment. There was no field studies for this to estimate impacts, which were done using the size of the footprint and spacing of project features. Another component of a consultation is our conservation measures. And we took an approach that has been used on some programmatic BOs in California before, but nothing at this scale, to split up our conservation measures. So we had our general and split those into design and implementation, and I'll touch on that for a moment, as well as our guild and species specific. With 266 species, there's no way that you could do conservation measures for each one. I mean, you could, but it would take a very long time. And all of them are pretty repetitive. So we're able to roll them up where appropriate to the guild level, and then created species specific ones where there's specific life history issues or specific locations that were particularly sensitive that overlapped our project area where we needed some additional guidance. So as I said, like our design measures were, I think, really critical since there was no field surveys with this. The biggest one was the habitat assessment. So this forced projects in the design phase to go through kind of the regular project planning parts that they do, and through that be able to use this assessment. They were doing species specific surveys. Our first talk was talking about having these guidelines. So we have appendices, right, that have the specific surveys to use for presence absence. And the biggest one is this design impact avoidance and minimization. So since we didn't know at this level or at this time the location of all of these project features, projects were able to then design their way out of impacts. So, with minimal broadband, there's the conduit that is a linear alignment, but then there's also different project features that support that infrastructure. So being able to move those from, important habitat for a red-legged frog and move it, 500 feet or a mile along the way, this type of project has that design flexibility. And so we were basically saying that folks had to do that in order to use this programmatic. So additional streamlining and flexibility actions that we took was early coordination with all of the federal agencies that overlap this project, and you can see it's a huge list here. And these, all of these agencies designated Caltrans and Federal Highways as the lead agency for their Section 7 consultation. This was work that was done by Jen Osmondson at Caltrans and Jeanette at Federal Highways. And so everybody saying that Caltrans was the lead agency for this effort really allowed us to use a single pathway for ESA compliance. We also streamlined how projects could amend themselves to the PBO. We currently have these project notification reports, which are specific for each office, that are essentially checkboxes, right? You have to include this, this, and this, and really takes that consultation time from, you know, the typical 60, 135 days down to about a month. The Fish and Wildlife Service is also developing a D key, and this isn't it. This is another one, but they will be putting it together, which has a series of yes or no questions using our conservation measures, and leads the user to a determination if the project can, if it qualifies. And the product is an automated official response that the project is consistent. So once again, taking your consultation period time from 135 days to 32 minutes. So that's pretty neat. We also really had a thoughtful approach for our conservation measures, trying to take that conservation-minded lens to them. So we have our category, we call them category 1 and category 2, and Chris Pinsetich, who is around here, not here in this meeting, but from Caltrans, came up with this idea to create a menu, essentially, of conservation measures that you could apply. And this really allowed Caltrans a lot of flexibility in designing their projects because they knew what they could and could not do depending on what their level of impacts were for different species. And so, yeah, so your effect determination determined that pathway to utilizing those different measures. So if you were going to have temporary impacts, you were going to do all of our general measures and our category 1, and these are typical, you know, seasonal work windows, et cetera. And that guaranteed that your project then was an NLAA. If you were going to have permanent impacts, you could use those category 1 measures, but you could also use the category 2. And so this included working outside of work windows for this long linear deployment of infrastructure. Work windows are a really challenging thing seasonal work windows, challenging thing to design projects around. So this really helped get to project delivery for Caltrans. At the time we were working on this as well, as Fish and Wildlife Service released their mitigation framework, which we were then able to apply to this project with the concept of no net loss. And so this was worked into all projects have to have a no net loss mitigation plan. And so this really helped the Fish and Wildlife Service allow for an easier jeopardy analysis because they didn't need to evaluate every mitigation proposal that came in, because the high level details were already addressed. I'm going to skip on to our lessons learned. Because this is a big takeaway. You know, the early coordination with all the stakeholders was really helpful in leading to an efficient and streamlined consultation process, plus our rapid project delivery. There was a question earlier about how long it took to do the PBO. I think we did it in, it was just looking up 12, maybe 15 months from beginning to end. But this included, like, you know, weekly, bi-weekly meetings with all of our partners to work out all of these details and lots of exchanging of ideas. The tiered approach to conservation measures based on species determination was also really, really helpful for both Fish and Wildlife Service in making their jeopardy determinations, as well as Caltrans. There's fewer initiation needs because the project is already designed to have no net loss. Incidental take was included in the project, but we can build in lower impact projects to these LAA species with our category 1 measure. So you can do a mix and match of different measures. And from the Caltrans side, this was really helpful in that there were no surprises. It was easier for staff to design projects to not rise to the level of take. Since we did this, most projects were still in this design phase, they were able to use a lot of those design conservation measures to kind of design their projects away from having impacts. There are preferred measures for these tiered measures, but if we need to implement different ones, with outside the work windows or whatever, it doesn't impact the delivery of the project, which is really important for Caltrans. The mitigation framework on this scale is huge. As I said, the service released this policy during the consultation, and it delivered flexibility for Caltrans without being overly prescriptive. They allowed for non-traditional mitigation approaches. For example, Caltrans is currently assisting Fish and Wildlife Service with Point Arena mountain beaver occupancy surveys, and that is counting as mitigation for impacts along Highway 1, which is along the coast of California. And yeah, the service was really open-minded about what compensating for impacts could look like. It was not just an acreage approach. And so this was really refreshing for me as a consultant who is often dealing with that. But it was also helpful for Caltrans because they could think outside the box. We were going to be impacting species that don't typically have projects in their area. There's no conservation banks. It's really challenging to implement turnkey solutions. And so being able to really work collaboratively with the service, both at the office and the region level, was instrumental. And so applicability beyond middle mile broadband. These large scale deployments of projects are a lot, and it really takes a lot of effort and talking between all of the groups that are included, both interagency, from the federal to the state level to the, bringing in consultants who have this experience. And I think, there's a lot of nationwide or regional connectivity projects on the horizon. More middle mile is being deployed nationwide. And so having this effort used as a template for future projects, I really hope can help, because as I said, it was 13 months from beginning to end. To date, there have been, I believe, 7 projects that have utilized the PBO. But as I said, many projects are able to design their way from having impacts. And so from a conservation standpoint, that is great. And from a project delivery standpoint, that is also great. And with that, once again, I'd like to thank my agency partners who couldn't be here. I so enjoyed learning and talking and creating something new for conservation. Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? All right, I have one to start.
Yeah.
So as Pima County is working on only 140 miles, not 10,000, we are also thinking about where connections may come in and thinking about ahead to say areas where there might be impacts. So how broad of an area were you looking at around?
Yeah, so we put a 500-foot buffer on either side. California doesn't have maps of their right-of-way for the state highway system, which is great. So added that 500-foot buffer just to try to incorporate all of that. There also were discussions about some of our species are really sensitive to noise. So expanding that action area to impact or to incorporate impacts to noise. But as I said, this really conservative high-level approach really made it easy so that for the service to make a no jeopardy determination, because we were estimating impacts way greater than were actually anticipated. And so even with those higher levels of impacts, it's still, we still were able to get a PBO. And I have the map and slides for that if you want that. I can provide that.
Yeah. I will follow.
Yeah.
All right. Karen.
Kind of a similar sort of inquiry there, just so I understand. I think I misunderstood what you said. So you had the slide that showed the mitigation measures for those likely to have adverse impacts and those unlikely to have adverse impacts.
Yeah.
And it appeared that on the likely to have adverse impacts, I believe there will be impacts. There was an ability to reach down into the construction mitigations that typically limit when you can build, which is typical with like bats and nesting birds. Did I understand that correctly? That you not to just throw your hands up and say, well, there's an adverse impact anyway, but you're leaning more heavily on the faster construction process than on trying to hold those.
Yeah. So yeah, the construction efforts on this, like the plan is essentially they have, 10 miles of highway, and they're just kind of moving along with the trenching, and there's different construction methods. And so some of that was, I can, oh dear, can you go back?
I was just trying to see if you put flexibility in there instead of doubling down.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's one day into the next stuff.
Where do you want to go? I just want to go out of presenter mode. Yeah, it's hard to keep it all together. So the nesting season, for instance, right? So, all of the species, there was only one category 1 measure for birds, and that was the seasonal nesting season or seasonal work window. If you were going to work outside of that, that put you into that LAA determination for species. There were, a bunch of different construction methods, and some of those different guild specific or species specific conservation measures. The trenching and pavement was going to have the least amount of impact, but was going to be, the higher cost and slower process. And so by limiting that in certain areas or times, that helped mitigate those impacts to species. And on the design phase, the engineers knew this, right? They had this up front. And so for certain areas, like especially vernal pools in the Central Valley of California, this was a big thing. If you go outside of the pavement, you're going to have an impact. And so they were able to find, different highway systems that avoided those vernal pools and change the alignment to reduce those impacts. I don't know if that's helpful.
More questions? All right, questions for any of our other speakers? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
This is for Laci, if you're still there. The question is whether you do any collaborations with states outside Florida.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the question was whether we've collaborated with states outside of Georgia. And we haven't done that, but we actually have realized in kind of the learning process, especially about our BAT programmatic, that we wish we had at least coordinated with the field offices in the surrounding states, because we do occasionally have projects that will cross state lines slightly. And in those situations, because we didn't do that coordination and we didn't include those other states in the description of the action in that programmatic, we then are outside of the scope in those situations. So we are hoping that when we get to the end of the period of that programmatic, that we can work with the surrounding state field offices to try and cover those small amounts of project impact that would leave Georgia and go into other states.
Other questions?